Good morning, Pat.
Good morning, Chris. Nice to see you.
Always good to see you.
Thank you.
So,
We're gonna, yep,
what do we have on the docket for Holy Compost this morning?
good. Um, well, yeah, I'm so happy to do this work with you. And I use the word work. That's not the correct word. I love having this connection with you and talking about things that I don't talk uh about with other people. And I wish I would. So maybe that's what our practice is about, that we could spread this a little further. Well, so I brought along a little poem, or little writing, I guess, by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I think that's how it's pronounced. And here's what he says. Tell a wise person or else keep silent, because the mass man will mock it right away. I praise what is truly alive, what longs to be burned to death. And so long as you haven't experienced this, to die and so to grow, you are only a troubled guest on the dark earth.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
That's something you could unpack and unpack and unpack.
for sure, for sure. But right off the bat, I'd say I'm definitely a troubled guest.
I think we're all troubled guests. It's just a matter of the phase of life we're in and the degree of trouble.
Yes, yes, yeah. But we are guests. We do agree on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes I wonder if we even recognize that we're guests.
Well, but a guest implies that you can leave when you want to leave.
But doesn't a guest also imply, in my old way of thinking of things, somebody that behaves themselves? Because you're a guest.
That
You
would
don't
be
go around
nice.
littering.
Yeah,
Would be
that would be
nice.
nice. Not all guests are like that, but
That's true. And
um,
besides, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
I've got a quote from Cynthia Bourgeault, and that I'd like to read. Three
Okay.
quotes. The thing that dies at death is the burden of carrying our ego self and mistaking it for our true self.
Mm, mm,
And then
mm,
another one. Who we are is held in God from before time. Um,
mm,
I mean,
mm,
not just rocks, goes right to my soul and just, just kind of grabs onto it.
mhm,
Um, we are met with extraordinary intimacy at death, and death proves no interruption to identity.
mm,
So, I
mm,
mean, when we die, in I guess in theory, all the clutter or uh the mistaken identity uh goes away. As she says, the thing that dies at death is the burden of carrying our ego self and mistaking it for our true self.
mhm.
So um the lies that we tell ourselves about what's important, like how do I look, or what does somebody think or about me, or
How am I doing?
how am I doing, right? What's my performance like?
Mhm.
These are all just they the problem is that they seem so big when we're wrestling with them. They seem so big,
Mhm.
but they can be really extinguished by the spirit they are for me, at least.
Yes.
um
Yes.
Only not all the time, but when I ask for it,
Mm.
those things are extinguished by the spirit. And also when I'm in nature, which is my big go-to for spiritual sustenance, I'm just overwhelmed with um spaciousness, light, beautiful breeze and air to breathe. And even if it's a crummy day out, it's just, I'm surrounded by all this life. And it's
Mhm.
hard to not, it's hard to stay focused on trivial things when you're in that state.
Totally. And I was just thinking as you were speaking of nature, how it doesn't appear to me that nature has the same mundane or trivial concerns that that the human being does. I mean, I don't see any trees like, hey, you're not looking too good today. You got a couple of dead branches.
Did
It
you,
just,
where your socks don't match?
yeah, like it's just, all is well with it, with nature, does it struggle at times when it's like a little, ever seen one of those films, time lapse film, where it shows a pod opening and come? I mean, it's awesome. If we could just sort of take a page out of nature's book instead of destroying nature as we are doing on this planet, boy, we would be so much better off. But we know better than nature, you have to get in control of nature. I mean, it's just yikes. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and if we get enough weapons, we can fight nature.
Yeah, yeah, tame it.
Yeah, tame it and put it and spray it on our crops to make sure that we can get enough yield, no matter what damage it's doing to the person who's eating on the end of the fork.
Oh God, we're going down a slippery slope.
That's right.
Watch
But
out.
so yeah, so I mean I love having a home and I love my home, but when I step outside, I feel like a burden has lifted. Like there was a cover over how far my spirit can go when I'm
Yeah,
inside. And when
yeah,
I'm outside, it just bursts into this sort of infinite. Um,
absolutely.
and of course,
Absolutely.
I live in the country, so it's easy to access. It wasn't when I lived in the city, it really wasn't as easy as it is now.
Sure. It's interesting. When I think about that, sometimes I know I've gone out into nature. I've been in some certain place in my psyche, or whatever you would call it, where I'm sort of loose at ends for some reason. I'm trying to figure out something that isn't figure outable. Is that a word?
Yes, it
You
is a
know.
word.
Okay. Thank you.
We just made
Uh,
it a word.
Perfect. It's got to go in web. We got to call up Webster. Hello. Um, that when I go out in nature, I can almost feel overwhelmed by what you just described, which is that, spaciousness of it. And there's no, stop here at this line thing. And it can almost overwhelm me. I've learned to stay with that. I've learned to stay with that sense, and it goes away, it dissipates, because I'm allowing myself to not be in a box. And so it's interesting though. I can be overwhelmed and almost a little fearful of nature.
So I'm tell me more about that. So what's the sequence of sensation or thought?
um it doesn't seem like actual thought. It feels more like a sort of bodily response. Um and just thinking about it as I'm trying to think about it at this moment, I think it's that there's no control on nature. I mean, in my little place here, I can control, put this here, put that there, lock the door, lock the windows, put a blankie around me, and
Turn the heater up
oh yes. How did you know that, Chris?
because we live in Maine. That's why.
Oh, that's right. Um, and so there's only a sense I'm okay. I'm protected, or I'm like a lion or a lioness. Okay, nobody can get here. Then I go outside, and this is cultural, I'm sure, because as a child I had none of this on board. I would go out in those woods and I would go as far as I could. I got lost several times as a child in the woods because I had no fear of it, no sense that I had to protect myself. And of course, we want a balance, right? We want a little bit of both of those. But I found in the past probably decade or maybe more, a sense of feeling unsafe in nature.
Hmm.
And I'm not comfortable with that feeling because I want to enjoy the nature that we have. And if I'm occupied in it and I'm doing something, taking a walk, that seems to leave the fear. But
Well,
as I'm,
I think
yeah,
it's well founded. I mean, you can freeze to death or become so hot that you get dehydrated and die that way. You can get attacked by bugs.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
There are porcupines and fox and wolves and coyotes, and so
yeah,
and I mean, so I like to have my home nearby
sure,
or my
sure,
campsite nearby,
yeah,
because I'm older and because I don't like to be physically uncomfortable.
right,
Um, so I think that's a real legitimate fear.
sure. I also think that this is just coming to me as you were speaking. I was getting the vision of this, that, like nature looks like it knows what it's doing. It's like, how do you know what you're doing? I don't.
Well, you know what? I think it's the instinct within the blue jay or the instinct within the oak tree or
Yeah,
that does know what it's doing.
it does.
Yeah.
I think I'm envious.
But we have instincts that tell us when we're hungry and, cold
Yeah, that's true.
and when we need companionship, when we need somebody to embrace or our instincts tell us that.
Well, I think something's coming, Chris. Like nature is not codependent on me. It can live without me. It doesn't care whether I'm trying to shine its leaves or rake its grass or whatever. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there is something there. I mean, it sounds silly to be saying it this way, but I do think, yeah, I can sense that it's going to be fine without me, and maybe I'm like, well, what do I do then? How do I relate to you? Well, it's maybe nature, if it could speak, would say, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. Wow, I
Well,
don't.
my if my spiritual structure, if there is such a thing, is that the creator or the beloved or the higher power lives in each person's soul and in the soul of every living thing. So, you know, I'm looking at the grass out there and I'm thinking, okay, there's about 5 million blades of grass, and the creator's soul is living in the soul of that blade of grass times a million other things, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's where the connection is for me. When I go outside, I think that um, the soul. Well, I'll just use the word God. I know that's difficult for some people, and I understand that it should be, but for me, it's been a positive thing all my life. So this, if the soul of God lives in every living thing, which I believe it does, I do more than believe it does. I experience it that way.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's not some kind of intellectual construct.
Intellectual. Yeah. Right.
It's instinctual almost.
Yes. Yes.
Um, then I think we are surrounded by this spiritual force at all times, and maybe on steroids when we're in nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Certainly the indigenous peoples would agree with your concept of God being in nature, in all of nature. And that's why they had such reverence. And, I read about the the hunter-gatherer portion of their culture, and they never stayed in one place too long because they recognized as they stayed there, it used up the area. And if you continued to stay there, it would ruin it. So they would move and
They
let
didn't
that
want to
rebuild.
replete,
I mean,
they didn't want to deplete the resources.
correct. And boy, what a beautiful honoring of nature. And not only that, not only an honoring, but such insight and care, literally caring that, look, we built a fire here and now the earth is dry. We must move it so it can get juicy again.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
There was that wonderful
that's
awareness and the honoring of the instinct of respecting the earth and respecting all of the physical resources that we depend on so much,
absolutely.
which to me is that whole idea is just so full of so much grief
I know.
and heartache as to how humans are treating the earth now.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, that's a very difficult awareness. But maybe with the growing awareness around that, people will begin to build more respect again. I mean, I think that's happening on a small scale, um, um, but less in the corporate world.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if we want to spend a minute on the word religious words and
Okay.
what they conjure up in our psyche and in the collective psyche. There's a lot of
Sure.
there's a lot of resistance, I
Mhm.
think, and legitimate resistance to religious words.
Mhm.
God, I mean, God is
Yeah.
there are very few people I know who are comfortable, not comfortable, would use the word God um, in a irreverent, in a reverent, praising way.
Mhm. Why
Uh,
do you think that is, Chris?
what was that?
Why do you think that is? I mean, we can both talk about it. I'm just
I mean,
curious if you.
yeah, I think that the religious institutions, especially the church, I grew up in the church and was kind of marinated in the church, but it was the UCC church, which is a very small. I think the UCC church represents 5% of Christian denominations. So it's not a very prevalent, the stuff that I learned was not very prevalent, but there are, the church over the millennia has, you know, my mother used to say the problem with churches is that they're full of people,
Mhm.
and people screw up all the time. No one is exempt from that.
Right.
So, and why would the church be any different than school or,
Right.
town meeting or
Yep.
any of the institutions that we have?
Right.
Girl Scouts, every institution that's out there has been corrupted and
Mhm.
has been um, um, corrupted.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about it?
Um, yeah, I mean, I have seen, particularly over the past good 10 years, but probably longer than that, a pushback um of the use of that word God. Um like you, I don't struggle with that word. I don't, when I say the word God, I do not picture the, the old man in the sky with the beard and pointing his finger, bad Pat, at all. I do picture that the word for me denotes this, that there's a spiritual energy that is imbued in all of life, including us, obviously, and that, and then that quote entity is really love. And what does love mean? Then we can go to that, right? Love means, and that's a really good question. I'm just going to try to say a few things what I believe love means or is. Yeah, I'm actually in a little bit of a struggle. So I've heard
And
that
you
the word
should
love.
be. I think you should be in a struggle to define love.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, I get a little bit of echo. Okay. I've heard it said love is a verb. It's an action word. Well, for me, just personally, this is the only way I can do this, is to say that when I'm feeling love or I'm felt loved, then all is right with the world. I mean, that's it. I come out of this place of fear and judgment and a sort of a darkness into a place of being okay, more than okay, but certainly okay. And being just okay, I'm good with that.
You're okay with that?
I'm okay with okay. So and that is usually, again, when I'm either giving it love in my frame of reference, what that means, or I'm receiving it. And usually as I give it, within a very short time, it returns. So that energy is it seems very reciprocal, on an automatic reciprocal thing going on. It's like I'm watching out my window right now. The leaves are falling from the trees like snow right now. It is just amazing. They are falling like snow.
I was just, as you were describing love, I was thinking about the energy of the wind, which actually is related to breath, and breath is spirit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So whenever the wind blows, I always, not always, because I'm often distracted with stupid things, but when I'm paying attention and the wind blows, it's an immediate awareness of the presence of God.
Yeah.
And so let's do a little deep dive into
Sure.
into the word God, or the what we use for the words for this this intense it's impossible to describe, and it should be impossible to describe, but there's a sense with me that um I'm that all is right with the world. uh, I'm loved, you're loved, we're all loved. We're all, I was going to say we're all okay. We're much, much, much more than okay, in my opinion.
Sure.
Human beings, just like that leaf out there, we are a miracle. Each and every one of us are a miracle, as is the rock, as is the oak tree. We're all a miracle. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the word God and the word miracle are very closely knit to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
I do have a sense that there is I was going to say tangible. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but I'll go with it. Tangible presence in my life that is always there and only waits for me to be aware of it. It's
Yes.
always right there. And I can be tangled in my ego, tangled in the superficialities, tangled in judgment and criticism, tangled in, um, life just isn't perfect enough.
Mm.
And for a long, long time. And then I will see the wind or something will happen, or maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe I just get the awareness that this presence is this miraculous presence is around me and
Mm.
in me
Mm.
and is um is supporting me in every way. And it's I mean, how why would I ask for anything else after experiencing that? I mean, it's an experience that um meets all of my needs.
Yeah. 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 I was thinking of what you're saying very closely, and um, I too have experienced, a sense that um, I'm being taken care of. Definitely could, maybe you'll do the same. I can think of very specific kinds of things. As we've discussed a bit here, I think, I've been in recovery now. Next month on the 17th, I'll have 31 years of not drinking or using any other kinds of chemicals or substances. And early in my sobriety, I realized, first of all, that to have the desire to drink removed, just gone, is miraculous for someone who needed to drink every single day. And it happened, fairly early on, and from others that I've heard, that's not uncommon, that the desire to drink becomes removed. Now, is that because there was a readiness? Yes. Yes, I think that's a piece. However, is it also something that recognizes the readiness and is sort of patiently waiting, like you just spoke of, love, or miracle, whatever word I think you were using? So it's something that sort of waits. It doesn't say, hey you, I need your attention. It doesn't do that. Gee, the ego is good at that, so they get that covered. The ego has that covered. So the specific thing I want to talk about is just share it as quickly, is that, I remember, like, maybe several weeks into going to AA, and the message was go every day if possible to a meeting, which I did. And just keep showing up. And so I did that, and I'd say around a month in, maybe a tiny bit more than that, I had this thought come to me, a thought that I had never had before, just plunked into my mind. And it was simply this: hey, you're doing something good for yourself. It was like, what? Yep. You're doing something good for yourself. That's really great. And it sounds so mundane and silly, but it was really a thought I had never had in my
I
life.
think it's incredibly profound,
It
incredibly profound, because you
was.
were doing something good for you.
It really was. And, I still long, as when I get stuck, and I've got stuck many times since that point, and again, continue to right up until this moment. And I'll sometimes think about that. But it isn't something you can grasp at.
No.
You literally have to forget yourself. You have to forget yourself. And that's very hard to do. And it's in that forgetting of self that something speaks.
Oh, amen, amen, amen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
relate so much to that.
Yeah.
And I also relate to the, oh, I need to hold on to that so I can get some more of it. And
Yeah.
my brain needs to figure out what were the steps that I took to get to that point so that
Yeah.
I
What
can do.
preceded that?
Well, give me a procedure
There's no procedure.
there's no procedure. It's just a matter of, as a friend of mine
Forgetting.
said, it's just a matter of allowing.
Yeah. Yeah. Forgetting and allowing, or allowing and forgetting, whatever, this forgetting thing. When I say that, I mean, it's a letting go of need it to be this way, or I need this, or I need that. I don't know what I need. I never have known what I needed. Never. Still don't. So that's the trick. And I use the word trick, but because it seems almost like a trick, because everything else in me is like, I've got to do it, ding, 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 and in that ding, 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 I'm pushing away the one thing that I need, which is the love. And I'm going to use the word of God. That's what I need. That's what I long for. That is what keeps me remembering that I too, that's my job, to bring love. That's it.
Mm.
So it's
I
a
mean,
never-ending cycle.
it's a beautiful thing that you describe, and I have a palpable sense of your heart and soul are in that description, and I completely relate to it, because it's exactly the same thing that I experience when I get out of my own way. I have to get out of my own way first, and then allow it.
Mhm.
So even if I ask for it, God, please be with me, please be with me. My brain is still, going over there trying to find something else that will save me from my
Mhm.
trivialities and my ridiculousness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you think this wonderful thing that you and I experience, that gives life meaning and dimension and texture and just is so miraculous? How do you think religion screwed up to make to turn so many people off? And I think people have been turned off legitimately by religion.
Yeah. Well, I've read a little bit about this, and I agree with what I've read, which is the church, either unintentionally or intentionally, it's not clear, removed or placed a barrier between people's personal experience, like we just shared, and the pulpit, or whatever, those who know
The authority.
the authority. Yes. And short-circuited that, um, uh, short-circuited the promise of God's availability to all of us as we are, just as we are. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if that is the complete answer, but that's been my, and further even builds a wall, through did you do thus and so and thus and so and thus and so and thus and so, and if you got all that, then maybe God will get to you.
Maybe I'll give you a little love.
Yeah, maybe I'll give you a
Little.
thimbleful.
Thimbleful.
So it just separated people from God. I think, like, again, some, I believe, is probably intentional because of the desire to have power over. It's pretty hardwired into the cultures that have been coming up through the millenniums. I mean, the
And
Roman.
some things never change. I mean, what we see politically now happened at the dawn of time. I mean,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, that, Richard Rohr talks a lot about this. We've talked about it a bit too. And that is this dualism. A church built on dualism. Well, I don't know. I don't think it's going to work too well. I don't think we don't have two gods. Okay. We have one God.
that's right. Yeah, and I think the the do's and don'ts that churches created. So when you let's say let's pick out what are some of the sins? I'm not Catholic, so maybe because you have been both
Yeah.
congregational and Catholic.
Yes.
What are some of the don'ts in the Catholic Church? For instance, I'm not bashing Catholics because I love Catholics.
Well, one that sort of comes up right away is the original sin.
Yeah, so when I was in seminary, I was just thinking about this the other day. Somebody asked to say, what did they teach you in seminary? And I thought, gosh, I never thought of that. So then I mean, I spent a lot of money and I spent even more angst reading a million books and listening to a million lectures by people who were in the know. Anyway, I think one of the big things is in seminary that I learned was that there's an attempt to take down the structures and take down the assumptions, disassemble the students' assumptions.
Right.
Which is really the way, I mean, I think that's an excellent pedagogical model.
Approach. That's a great approach.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and then teach the student where to go to look and, how to find, I was going to say the truth. It's not the truth, but the actual happenings. And so I try to visualize the early church, and the earliest church was right after the resurrection, when people were gathering in caves, 2 people, 6 people, a dozen people, and there were no dogma. There was no dogma. There was no doctrine. There was just this astonishing experience that these people had who knew this Jesus guy.
Yeah.
It was an astonishing experience. So, and I love all religions. Well, I don't know all religions, but the religions that I know, I love. And I often tell people that I'm a Jewish, Buddhist, Quaker, Christian. Because those are some of my favorite. Oh, and Sufi. Those are some of my.
Wait a second. You're also a pagan. You're dyed-in-the-wool pagan.
Probably, although I don't know much about paganism.
Well, it's nature.
Nature, yes.
Yeah.
But again, my mother said the problem with churches is that it's full of people. People are going to be people. People are going to be devious. They're going to be cliquish. They're going to be exclusive. They're going to be all the things that people are. And hopefully the powers of divine salvation, if that's a loaded word too,
intervention.
Intervention.
Oh,
intervention. Yeah.
Intervention. Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is what the word intervention is really what happens to me now in my life over and over
Mhm.
again, hopefully
Yeah.
each day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
so, and I don't mean the kind of intervention where, that happens in previous to AA or sometimes after it, but so much, but just, Chris is um, occupying herself with these concerns that either are not productive or there's no solution, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe some people will get hurt some way by them or whatever. And I get sort of, I have, there's this force that feels like something's coming in and going like this to pull me back to it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to get me away from the things that occupy my mind, which are probably
Yeah. Yeah.
80% not productive.
Only 80. Wow, you're doing well.
Yeah, so I think the church, I mean, my wish for humanity is that everybody could take their own religious
Oh,
experience that they had when they were
okay.
growing up, take that religious experience or take that religious education and
Mm-hmm.
totally put it aside for a moment
Mm-hmm.
and ask themselves, you know, how do I feel a sense of the infinite in my everyday life? How do I feel, um, how do I experience a sense of rightness, a sense of that I'm taken care of, that
Mm-hmm.
I'm protected, um, that I'm loved beyond measure, or that the universe is, displaying its splendor before my eyes, and can I beat that? No, I can't beat that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't improve on that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wish people would just put what they learned when they were younger, just put it aside for a moment
Yeah.
and get in touch with the experience of something higher, something beloved, something nurturing, something in charge of the universe.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I'm thinking um, of the using the phrase, you are the church, you
yes.
know, you are the church. And if we're all the church on our individually, and we come together collectively, if that takes place, but even when we go apart from each other, we are still the church. And to stretch that out even further, we mentioned briefly the original sin, and that's in the Bible, that the part of the beginnings of that, this is just I'm envisioning this. I don't have any proof, but that there were people back way, 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 way back when the church was forming. And just like today, there are people who are struggling within themselves around many things, and just to capture it, trauma. Okay, so those people that become traumatized by something that happens in their life, something either significant or not so significant, but it impacts them in some way, that then they don't act accordingly. They don't act in a way that's comfortable for others to see. And suddenly we begin to judge that, and I'm talking back, that 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 was what launched this original sin, that we're seeing something, some people were seeing something that they were uncomfortable with. Little Joe over there, he always comes up behind people and pushes them, or he does something that isn't nice. And we don't want him to do that anymore. We don't want to find out why he does that. We just want him to stop. And so we create these rules to control those who do not keep in line. And I just, that has followed us. That has been on our backs ever since. and that's what I think it's about. That instead of loving little Joe for his difficulty and his striking out and finding out what little Joe needs, perhaps a hug would straighten him right out, a real honest hug. We love you, Joe. And, there's I think the word is combato or something like that in the African, where they do that, where they bring somebody who's troubled into a circle and they love him.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. And you brought it up.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
The whole community surrounds the person who broke the rules and says
Yes.
what they value about him.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, that's the way it needs to be done. And what do? We throw people in prison.
Yes.
It's so archaic and so
it's insane.
Cruel and insane. As if, because I've done my share of I did some prison volunteer work for a while, and what I found was the backstory of these prisoners was absolutely heartbreaking.
Yes.
Every single one of them.
Yes.
And the more nasty they were, the more nasty their story
Absolutely.
was.
Absolutely. Yep.
And some of them even emerged from the nasty story with generosity and vulnerability. So
absolutely.
It's quite astonishing.
It totally is. So anyway, so the church, the church took a turn there to, it appears, to control the masses in a way that didn't disturb others. That we lockstep march to the crucifix. And I just don't think that was Jesus' message.
No. And I'm not even convinced or sure that Jesus intended to establish a new religion.
I agree.
Yeah, proof does not exist in scripture, first of all.
Right.
So, and we're not, when we think about our spiritual lives and about God, we're not dealing in the realm of proof. We're dealing in the realm of experience.
Yep.
So, anyway, I feel so empathetic with people who have had most people, I think, have had a bad experience with organized religion. And, the reason it's been a bad experience is that people are being people.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I need to go to church because I run out of nutrients, spiritual nutrients, on Saturday night. And I need to go get another week's worth of nutrients on Sunday morning. And I do get filled up. I also get frustrated because there's not enough vulnerability in church. There's not enough I don't know, because I'm of the I think if somebody knows what's going on in terms of their religious faith or their religion, they're probably wrong, because God does not, in my experience, God does not deal in the realm of I know.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm thinking nor rigidity, nor judgment, and all of those things. And sadly, my experience, pretty much across the board, I've attended a number of churches in this community, and sooner or later, you see it, and not only do you see it just like in a specific situation, judgment towards others, or yeah, towards others, period. But then you see it again, and you see it again, and then I get overwhelmed with it. And that has been pretty much what I see. Now, is that partly my bringing in something? I'm not even going to deny that, because I'm telling you something. I'm making a judgment right now. So, I guess my sense of it is, I get wide awake when I see someone or meet someone, and I can tell, or I have an instinctual response. This person has no agenda. And it's like, wow, whoa, how do I relate to no agenda? I'm in awe of it. At the same time, like they're just kind and present and loving and curious, always curious. People with no agendas are always curious. So when I meet that, I say, there it is. There's the church. There's the church I want to belong. Can I crawl into your block?
Can I crawl into your reality?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And Chris, not to embarrass you, I'd say that's where you come from, quite across the board in many, many ways.
Oh, that's very sweet. And I feel the same way about you. I mean, I have, fortunately, my father was the epitome of authenticity, and he was also full of joy, and he'd also had a tremendous amount of pain in his life. And he was a minister. And so I lived with the real thing
Sure.
until he died when I was 14. And I have no interest in anything but the real thing,
Yeah.
And it
Yeah,
means being vulnerable.
it does. It
But you know what?
does.
But vulnerability is not going to kill you. I've learned that.
No, it's not. It's not going to kill you. It's true. It's true. If
So
it's
what?
clean, if it's clean.
Yeah. So what do you think? Why do you think we protect our vulnerability, or yeah?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just from myself, my own experience, I think when I've allowed myself to be vulnerable in situations where the little voice, we've spoken about the little voice saying, not a good idea, not a good idea. And in my case, many, many times, ignoring the little voice who's clearly saying, not a good idea, shouldn't do that. And then becoming vulnerable and being very hurt. So, by a certain set of circumstances, oh boy, sorry. So in that kind of vulnerability, which is, I think that's vulnerable, that's not true vulnerability. That's just risk taking, perhaps.
Interesting to make a distinction between those two things.
Yeah. And knowing better. And again, that little voice, it's always loud enough for me to hear.
And it's such an incredibly valuable piece of information that your little voice is giving you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what I've learned, and what I learned at the age of 15 when I got into Alateen, because my mother was an alcoholic. And she had 17 years of sobriety in AA when she died. And it just transformed her life. But when I think of and now I lost my train of thought. Well, it'll come back. Oh, vulnerability. So so I remember sitting in an Alateen meeting, and you're nothing, you have to be vulnerable. Well, you don't have to, but that vulnerability is the theme of an Al-Anon or a 12-step program,
Mhm.
authenticity is the theme. It's
Of
the
course.
focal point.
Yeah.
So I learned that if I exposed myself and talked about my true experiences and feelings at Alateen, and things just got better and better and better in that group.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah, yeah.
realized that, what happens is if I expose my vulnerability, you're going to hear it and you're going to be more inclined to expose your vulnerability.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's kind of viral.
It is viral. Yes.
And
Yes.
and you don't, I mean, I've been vulnerable and been hurt, but much more often I've been vulnerable and received vulnerability back.
Yes. Yes. It's true. It's true. I'm going to have to go in a minute, but I'm taking what do you call it? I'm keeping score. That's a good way to say it. I ask people this question. I'm going to ask you, Chris. And so far, everyone has answered identically. And I'll tell you what that is after I ask you the question. So the question is, when we hug people, these are all kinds of different occasions. It could be just hugging somebody that we know sort of not great, not well. We can family member or anyone. But generally, when we hug, do you find that you always hold a tiny bit of yourself back?
I definitely do.
Yeah,
I think so. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's the physical closeness, which I don't know
yeah,
if I don't know if I don't know if the other person wants it from me, and I don't know if I
sure,
want it from the other person.
sure,
It's a body thing, so you want
yeah,
to make sure that it's not sexual if unless you're with someone you want it to be sexual with.
yeah,
Um, and then like I experienced just the other day, I had three great hugs when I went to see some people I hadn't seen in a while, and one that was
yeah,
kind of stiff. And that was not so pleasant. The stiff one was not so pleasant.
yeah.
So
It's interesting.
what's your experience?
I'm the same. I hold back. And everyone I've asked has answered they hold back. Now, but you said something curious that I want to just talk about a second, and that is that, and I don't think you're alone in this thought. I I don't want to. These might not have been your words. You don't want to cross a boundary, a physical boundary, or an emotional, psychic boundary. You just because you don't know where the other person's at. That said, my theory about this, and it's only a theory so far, is when we go to hug someone, no matter what the circumstance is, and unless we don't want to hug, if we have made a decision that we are going to hug someone, that we should hug them with all our heart and throw caution to the wind. And we don't do that. And so this is this is the thing that I'm working on. I'm going to see if anybody ever says they give their whole self, and when they do, I'm gonna interview them and ask them what that's about and how did they arrive there, because generally we don't hug with all we've got. So it's just curious. I'm it's not a big research project or anything, but it's just curious about it. I think it stands for something in our culture, because I bet in other cultures it's give it to me, but our culture, we don't give it all. We hold something back. And
It's
why?
so great that you're doing this little study,
Yeah,
and I'd be really interested to see what how other people respond.
yeah,
And I don't know. I think that before I hug somebody, I think I have I'm anticipating what I'm going to receive.
Yeah. And I think that's where we go wrong, because I don't know if go wrong is strong, but I think if we intend to hug someone, if we don't intend to hug someone with all we've got, the heart, the love, a sense that I'm unafraid, whatever it all is, then we shouldn't hug. Why should we do it? What's it about? Is it to keep somebody else happy? Maybe we say something like, before we hug that person, if our intention is, good, pure, loving, we say, okay, I'm going to give you a hug, but I'm going to give you a real hug. Are you ready? I don't know.
I
It's
think
just
that
something
would,
to think
I
about.
think if it wasn't you, that would scare the heck out of me. It's like, okay, what are you going to
No,
do?
so that's what, yeah, I mean, is there a certain phrase? Is there something that we would say that would be always comforting? I don't know. I think it's just something to think about, because when COVID hit and we couldn't hug, I thought that was a big loss, because most people that I come in contact with, that I'm, have connection with, we hug, when we, particularly upon parting. So I think culturally it's an interesting thing, the hug.
It is, and it's a vulnerable moment.
It is a
So,
vulnerable moment.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it hits that. I mean, I think vulnerability is just it's fascinating, it's essential, um
It's real,
and as you
obviously.
said once, it's it's the appearance of God, which I totally agree with.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you see vulnerability, you are seeing God, period.
Right. That's right. That's right. And you can't turn away. You can't turn away from it.
Right.
Well,
Well,
Chris,
another wonderful conversation, my friend.
I think so. I enjoyed it. I know that.
I did too.
Yeah.
So, we'll bless you on your day, and we'll look forward to our next Holy Compost discussion.
Yes, we will. Thanks,
Okay.
Chris.
Bye
All
bye.
righty. Bye-bye.
I'll record.